This video is going to walk you through the simile poem rough draft, which you will find in your poetry packet number 3. So the first poem that we're going to write this year is going to be a simile poem. And a simile is a comparison between two things using the words like or as. To anchor our simile poem, we are going to focus on a strong emotion. So look through the emotions listed here and try to choose one that you think you could write your poem about. Now, you could also pick an emotion that is not on the list. So if you think of something that you don't see here but you'd like to use instead, that's fine. I am going to use fear. This is my example. At this point, I would like you to put your chosen emotion in this blank. If you need to pause the video while you think of an emotion, go ahead. So at this point, you should have your emotion written here. So we are going to create similes. We're going to compare our emotion to other things, moments, or people. Now, to create our similes, we're going to start with that same emotion. Again, it's the same exact thing I wrote here. This is the emotion I'm focusing on. Now, I'm going to use these little phrases to help build my similes, because a simile is a comparison that uses the words like or as. So, here we go. Fear is like running through the woods at night. Because they're both scary. Fear is like a room full of clowns. Again, I'm comparing fear to a room full of clowns because I find them both scary. Now, at this point, I want you to pause the video and fill in all the way down to here with comparisons to your emotion. So whatever you picked for here, compare it to something that makes you feel that emotion. Pause the video until you get to this point. All right, now we're going to start doing our similes in a different way, where our first 5 similes all use the word like. Our next 5 are going to use the words as. So fear is as scary as a spider crawling up my neck. Fear is as scary as public speaking. And at this point, you're going to pause the video and fill in the rest of these. And chances are, whatever goes in this first blank is going to be the same. So maybe you picked happiness. So happiness is as joyful as, and then you're naming things that make you happy. So chances are whatever you put in this first blank is going to be the same for all of your similes. And then whatever you put in the second blank is what makes you feel that emotion. So fear is as scary as a roller coaster. So pause the video and you fill in the rest of your similes at this point. Now that I have all of my similes, basically 10 comparisons that I made, comparing fear to something that makes me feel fear, and all of them using the words like or as, I'm going to start my simile poem rough draft. So on the next page, you're going to see that there's a couple of requirements in this poem that I'm going to write. For example, somewhere in my poem, I need to include my emotion. So the word fear has to be in my poem. Another requirement is that at least 5 of my similes are in my poem. Notice it says 5 or more. So you can use 5 or more of your similes. And your similes are what you just wrote on the previous page. So I am going to use 5 or more of these in my poem. The third requirement is that my poem has to be at least 10 lines long. So just to make sure that I have 10 lines, I'm going to number them. All right, which means that's the shortest that my poem can be. And if I wanted it longer than 10 lines, notice that there is extra room on the next page if my poem gets to be a little bit long. The final requirement is that I have to use 2 other poetic devices from this list. So not only will my poem have similes in it, it will also have 2 of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this list and I'm going to think about which of these I think I'd be really good at. For example, I think I'd be really good at adding an automatopoeia, which is a sound word, and using rhyme. So I'll try to come up with some words that have the same ending. So I'm going to give my poem a title. I'm going to name mine Fear Focus, because my poem's going to focus on fear. You can come up with whatever you want for your title. And now I am going to start writing my poem by focusing on these 4 requirements. Now here I have my rough draft done. So just to clarify, when I was writing this, I made sure that I was following all of the requirements. The first requirement is to include the emotion. So I made sure I had fear somewhere in my poem. The second requirement was I had to use at least 5 of my similes. So I simply looked on the previous page, I found the 5 I liked the most, and I put them in here. Fear is like running through, it's supposed to be the woods at night. I better fix my poem. Fear is as scary as a roller coaster. Fear is like being lost at sea. Fear is as scary as a world without books. Fear is like a room full of clowns. So there were my 5 similes. The third requirement is it had to use at least 10 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And the final requirement was that I had to use at least 2 different poetic devices from that list higher up on the page. And I wanted to use automatopoeia and rhyme. So when I was writing the poem, I looked for opportunities to do that. So here you can see I used an automatopoeia. Ah! And I made sure I had at least one rhyme. Me and C are my rhyme. So I have now made sure that I met all the poem requirements, and this was my rough draft. Now in poetry, one thing to make sure of is you need to decide how long each line is. So you'll notice I have some short lines and I have some longer lines. So make sure you are deciding exactly how long each line is. You should not just be writing until you run out of space, like if you were writing a paragraph. So I recommend trying to have some short lines, like I have here, mixed in maybe with some longer lines, like I have here. And once you get done with your rough draft, you're ready, it's finished, and then the next time you're in class, you'll be turning this into a final draft. Good luck with your poetry.